A single bone, once, stood taller than a doorway. It didn't belong to any dinosaur, and what it belonged to is still, to this day, the largest land mammal ever confirmed to exist. The heat in Baluchistan's desert doesn't ease up, even as the sun starts to drop. In 1910, geologists surveying this stretch of Pakistan for oil hit something else instead. That bone, half buried in red clay, standing taller than any man on the crew. Nobody said anything for a moment. It wasn't a dinosaur. The rock was millions of years too young for that. Whatever this belonged to had grown large enough, long after the dinosaurs vanished, to leave behind a single bone, the height of a doorway. By the end of this list, you'll know exactly what it was, and why nothing alive on Earth today comes close to it. Every animal on this list was once the undisputed giant of its kind. Some make their closest living relatives look like scale models next to the real thing. By the end, you'll understand exactly how big evolution used to build, and how much of that size vanished within a geological heartbeat. Along a crumbling stretch of Uruguay's coastline, the Atlantic spends every day exposing whatever's buried in the rock beneath it. In 2008, what it exposed defied everything the fossil record had suggested was possible for a rodent. The skull in front of two researchers shouldn't, by any normal rule of biology, have existed at that size. That skull belonged to Josephoartigasia monesi, a rodent. Paleontologists Andres Rinderknecht and Ernesto Blanco described the specimen that year, dating it to between 2 and 4 million years old, with an estimated body weight close to 1 metric ton. Picture your family guinea pig, built at nearly 20 times the scale, the size of a small car, or a full-grown bull, with incisors built to rival a small tusk. No rodent alive today will ever again grow large enough to be mistaken for livestock. If a rodent could get that large, what was a lizard capable of? The next entry doesn't leave that question hanging. Across Ice Age Australia, something moved through sun-baked scrubland that outsized every predator sharing its continent. For years, scientists genuinely disagreed on exactly how large. The fossil evidence kept suggesting numbers that seemed almost too extreme to be real. That animal was Varanus priscus, Megalania, the largest land lizard ever confirmed to exist. Estimates range from 4.5 to 7 meters long. Even the conservative end nearly doubles the length of today's largest lizard, the Komodo dragon, a predator longer than a stretch limousine, sharing the continent with giant kangaroos, giant flightless birds, and very likely some of the first humans to arrive there. Nothing slithers through Australia's outback today that could look Megalania in the eye. A giant lizard on land is one thing. What was hiding in the water is even harder to picture, and even harder to believe. In the early 1830s, workers in Alabama kept pulling enormous fossilized vertebrae from the ground, bones so strange that the man who first examined them was utterly convinced he'd found a sea monster. He named it accordingly. It took another scientist and another decade to prove him wrong. The animal was Basilosaurus, king lizard, one of the earliest whales ever to swim Earth's oceans. Naturalist Richard Harlan described it in 1834. Richard Owen corrected the classification soon after, though the misleading name had already stuck for good. The most complete skeletons, found at Egypt's Wadi al-Hitan, the Valley of the Whales, show an animal patrolling shallow seas 40 million years ago. Up to 18 meters long, a school bus and a half, but slender and serpentine, with a bite that fossil evidence shows could crack straight through bone. The oceans have never again produced a hunter shaped quite like this one. Basilosaurus ruled its ocean 40 million years ago, but one animal on this list was alive recently enough that human eyes may actually have seen it. Somewhere on the Eurasian steppe, Something with a single massive horn crossed open ground. An animal so strange it may have helped inspire an entirely different creature in the myths of people who later found its remains. For decades, scientists assumed it died out with the rest of the Ice Age giants, hundreds of thousands of years ago. In 2018, new evidence completely upended that timeline, and the scale of the mistake stunned the researchers who uncovered it. The animal was Elasmotherium sibericum, the Siberian unicorn. A team led by researcher Pavel Kosintsev published radiocarbon dating in Nature Ecology and Evolution, pushing its last confirmed population to roughly 39,000 years ago, well within the window when early modern humans shared the same territory. Standing roughly the height of a professional basketball player at the shoulder and carrying a single horn longer than a golf club, this was a rhino, built at the scale of a small elephant, walking the earth closer to our era than to the age of dinosaurs. The unicorn wasn't a myth, it was a memory, and we arrived just late enough to miss it. If a rhino that size survived alongside early humans, what was swimming the ocean in that same stretch of time might be even harder to believe. We're now past the halfway mark of this list, and every single animal so far has been backed by a named researcher, a dated discovery, a real specimen, sitting in a real museum drawer somewhere. Nothing invented, nothing exaggerated, which makes what's still ahead even harder to process, because the next 4 animals dwarf almost everything we've covered so far. In 2008, a team excavating Peru's Pisco Formation, desert that used to be ocean floor, uncovered a skull so large the crew assumed it had to be a mix-up. It wasn't. What they'd found rewrote the record for the most dangerous predator ever to patrol the open ocean. In 2010, paleontologist Olivier Lambert and colleagues formally described the animal as Livyatan melvillei, an apex predator sperm whale that lived roughly 13 million years ago, with teeth up to 36 centimeters long, close to the length of a human forearm, and among the largest functional teeth ever recorded from any predator. Unlike modern sperm whales, which mostly hunt squid in the deep, Livyatan's jaw structure suggests it hunted other whales directly, making a modern orca look, by comparison, like a mid-tier hunter, working several rungs down the food chain. No ocean on Earth today hides anything capable of hunting whales themselves. If the ocean once held a predator that size, imagine what it took to get airborne at the same scale. What's coming next makes even Livyatan look earthbound by comparison. 6 million years ago, over what is now Argentina, something rode rising columns of hot air with barely a wing beat, large enough that anyone below might have mistaken it for aircraft. Researchers who found it genuinely debated whether an animal this size could have flown at all. That animal was Argentavis magnificens, described in 1980 by paleontologists Kenneth Campbell and Eduardo Toni, still the largest flying bird ever confirmed from the fossil record. Its wingspan reached roughly 7 meters, and at an estimated 70 kilograms, about the weight of a large adult, it was almost certainly too heavy to flap into the air like modern birds. It likely soared on thermal currents instead, the same technique a condor uses, just at a scale no living bird can replicate. The Andean condor, today's largest flying bird, has barely a third of that wingspan, comparable to a small private airplane, riding the wind on feathers instead of metal. The skies have been quieter and emptier ever since. As large as Argentavis was, it isn't even the largest flying animal ever to exist. That title belongs to something stranger still. In 1971, geology student Douglas Lawson was mapping rock in Texas's Big Bend region when he found bone fragments belonging to something that would force scientists to rethink the upper size limit of flight itself. How it ever left the ground remains a genuine, ongoing debate. The animal was Quetzalcoatlus northropi, not a bird, but a pterosaur, that shared the skies with the dinosaurs roughly 68 million years ago, and the largest flying animal ever known to science. Its wingspan is estimated at 10 to 11 meters, nearly as long as a fire truck, and standing on its folded wings, its shoulder height would have put it at eye level with a giraffe. The leading theory: a powerful vaulting leap, using its front limbs, launching an animal the size of a small aircraft directly into the air. Nothing has flown this planet's skies at that scale since, and nothing likely ever will again. We've covered giants of the land, sea, and sky. The final two never needed wings or fins at all, and they make everything before them look almost modest. In 1788, workers along Argentina's Luján River uncovered a nearly complete skeleton, unlike anything catalogued before, and shipped it to Madrid's Royal Cabinet of Natural History. What French naturalist Georges Cuvier did with it 8 years later helped change the course of science itself. In 1796, Cuvier used drawings of that skeleton to help establish one of biology's most important ideas: that species could go completely, permanently extinct, a concept not yet widely accepted before his work on Megatherium americanum. The animal stood nearly 6 meters tall, reared up on its hind legs, and weighed an estimated 4 tons, roughly the height of a 2-story building, as heavy as a full-grown elephant, with claws longer than a human hand. The sloths, hanging quietly in trees today, share a family tree with an animal that could have looked into a second-floor window. The trees it once browsed have long since forgotten what used to reach into their branches. Which brings us back to that leg bone in Baluchistan, because nothing on this list, not even Megatherium, comes close to what's at number 1. Researchers eventually traced that bone to Paraceratherium, a hornless rhino relative that roamed Central Asia roughly 30 million years ago. More complete skeletons, later found across Pakistan, Mongolia, and China, confirmed just how enormous it was. Paleontologists in 3 countries spent over a century independently unearthing pieces of the same species without realizing it. Standing close to 5.5 meters at the shoulder and weighing an estimated 15 to 20 tons, Paraceratherium remains the largest land mammal ever confirmed by the fossil record. Bigger than any mammoth, bigger than any elephant. Picture 4 or 5 African elephants fused into one animal. It could have rested its chin on the roof of a 2-story house without straining its neck. Even the undisputed largest land mammal in Earth's history eventually gave way to something smaller, and nothing has grown to fill that space since. Line these 9 animals up, and a pattern emerges that goes beyond record-breaking. A rodent built like a bull, a lizard longer than a limousine, a bird with the wingspan of an aircraft, a rhino that likely inspired unicorn legends, walking the earth closer to our era than to the dinosaurs. Evolution kept discovering, independently, across wildly different families, that bigger was a winning strategy, until, one by one, it stopped being one. Every animal on this list is gone, most within the last few million years. 1, the Siberian unicorn, within the last few tens of thousands. A blink against how long life has existed here. The largest version of nearly every major animal group that's ever lived is no longer here, and every version that replaced them is smaller. Nothing stays the biggest forever, not even the biggest thing that ever lived. So here's the question worth sitting with. If size was never permanent, if it was a phase every single time, on every continent, in every ocean, and every sky, what does that say about whatever comes next? Next time, we're staying in that same territory, looking at the one Ice Age predator whose bite marks scientists found on the bones of animals 3 times its size. If you want to know exactly how these giants hunted, and how recently the last of them vanished, subscribe now, because this channel is the only place putting the whole picture back together.